recording the session tonight because there were some people who could not attend. So I've just started recording. What that means is not that you should be silent, but that you should ask any questions you might have because you're probably going to be asking a question that somebody who is watching the recording won't be able to ask. So please use that to motivate yourself to raise those questions as we go. Now, one more person jumping on here. I'm going to start sharing my screen as well and admit as people come. All right, it looks like we're getting close to critical mass for attendees. For anybody who just joined us, in the chat, we've been sharing where you're calling in from, where you're zooming in from. The longest distance winner so far is Morocco. So if you can beat that, or if you can't, share where you're from in the chat, just out of curiosity. Let's see here. Got another New York, Jamaica. Oh, there we go. Okay, that's pretty good competition. Um, Texas, New York. All right, a couple more. Eugene, Oregon. Very good. All right. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I think we may still have people joining us as we go, but I'm just going to be letting them in as we talk. So I am going to go ahead and start. My computer is very ornery if I try to share screens full size or slides full size. So could someone unmute themselves and just tell me, can you see a slide on your screen? Can you see volunteer evening?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Very good. All right, well, we're going to get started then. Again, people are still joining us, so if you're hearing bings and things, don't let it distract you too much. Uh, Feel free to unmute yourself to ask questions, but if you're not speaking, please do mute yourself again because we've got a lot of people on the call and background noise can get to be a problem. But again, don't hesitate to unmute yourself when you need to. So with that, let's get rolling for tonight. This is what we're going to do tonight. Those of you who've been to previous volunteer evenings, this will be a familiar kind of pattern. We're going to be talking about the Notes of Encouragement volunteer campaign. But we're going to start with a quick intro to Molly Rising for those of you who are new. I want to give you at least a little context of who you're volunteering for and where your work fits in. I feel like that's important for volunteers to know. But then we're going to shift gears and dive right into the Notes of Encouragement campaign by talking about why notes, why we're doing this at all, and then how to write a note, and then some logistical issues, basically how to get the notes to us, and then what's going to happen with your notes. Um, then we're going to touch briefly on service hours because I know quite a few of you are doing service hours for school or for another institution. So I'm going to try to kind of address some of those questions because we usually get a lot of them. And then we'll wrap up with kind of next steps and how you can get rolling. And I say here we will end with question and answer, but please feel free to ask questions throughout. I'm going to stop several times and ask if you have questions, but you can also just unmute yourself and interrupt me, or again, use that chat function that we're using to share where you're from. So that's the plan for this evening. Any questions just about our agenda and what we plan to do? All right, well then we might get started. So before I dive into the intro though, I do want to ask you all just a few questions. So I want to know, and you can use the chat, has anyone ever been to Mali? I have, but anybody else ever been to Mali? Seeing some no's. No, no, no. Anybody? Okay, it looks like not. One of the reasons I ask is our May volunteer evening is going to be a little different. We're inviting all the volunteers to come and just learn a little bit more about Mali, culture, food, history, language. We're just going to have kind of a very casual evening to learn about Mali and maybe do like a little trivia competition with everybody. Um, so if you haven't been and it's not a place you're maybe going to get to in the near term, you can come learn a little bit more. We'll show some great pictures, etc. So I'll give you more information about that at the end. Um, But if you haven't been, it'll be kind of fun, I think. It'll be interesting. And then one other question before we get rolling in the chat. Does anybody know like any just random fact about Molly that you would share with everybody else? Anything? I love that you all want to volunteer, even though you've never been and you don't even know that much about Molly. That's interesting. I'll share one that probably you thought was too obvious, but when I started this job, the only thing almost I knew about Molly, other than where it is that Timbuktu is in Mali. Oh, somebody said an African country. Very true. Okay, a couple of you. So geography. We at least know where it is. That's a really good start. And mine, I guess, was geography too. If you've heard of the famous, city of Timbuktu, it is actually in Mali. So now you know a fact in addition to the continent about Mali. But again, if you come to that evening in May, hopefully you'll learn a little bit more. I'm even going to share a recipe or two from the great cuisine. So come and join us if you can. So again, the reason the slides look a little funny is my computer freaks out if I show the full slide. So thank you for bearing with me on this, but hopefully it'll be clear enough. Oh, Stephanie says young girls usually drop out of school at a very young age due to marriage or pregnancy. That is a pretty common occurrence, unfortunately, and something we work on. So that's true, Stephanie. Thank you. All right, so before we get into the specific of the volunteer work we're going to talk about tonight, I do want to give you just this quick background on Molly Rising. You can go to our website and learn a whole lot more, or feel free to ask me questions either tonight or send me an email. But I'm going to give you the quick kind of why, how, and what of Molly Rising to get you oriented. So first starting with the why Molly Rising even exists. So Molly Rising is essentially a group of people here in the US and in Mali, and increasingly around the world, as you can even see on this call, the people who believe two fundamental things. So the first is that we believe everyone has the right to an education. And then secondly, we believe that education can change people's lives for the better forever. And one thing I like to think about is, as powerful as it is to think about an education changing one person's life, which is great. We also see that education is changing whole communities and whole countries, and at the end of the day, our whole world for the better, because obviously we're all in this together. If the last year or so has made anything obvious, it's that. So if you believe those two things, you're basically in the right place. You're with a group of people who you have common values with when we think about the value of education and the importance of that in people's lives. So that's kind of why Molly Rising exists. How we work is kind of a complicated question. Obviously, there's a lot that goes into that. But I think the important thing to understand as a volunteer is that we really try to make sure that everything we do is grounded in what village parents, village students, the children, leaders in the villages, elders, teachers at our schools, what local people say they need, what I see as the problems and what they see as solutions or needs. So this is really important because sometimes when we're not living in a place, we think we have all these great ideas, we make some assumptions. Sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't. But what's really important is to make sure that we kind of check our assumptions and ground them in what people who are living in our partner villages really see as needs. So that's something that you'll hear us come back to quite a bit when we talk about volunteering and Molly Rising. And part of that is our work is driven really by local knowledgeable staff. So I am the only US-based staff person. So sometimes if I'm slow to get back to you, that's why. But the rest of our staff are Malian, they're in Mali, they know these villages, they work closely with parents, with students, with teachers. So that makes sure we stay grounded in the work in Mali, and how we do the work is really driven by that reality. And then lastly, the what we do, that's again kind of a big thing, but the quick overview is we partner with rural, basically remote villages in Mali to build schools where otherwise there would not have been access to a school for the kids. Our focus is middle schools because there's quite a big investment in primary schools in Mali. Still a big need for primary schools, but there's been some good activity there. So we focus on villages where kids would have to drop out of school after primary school because there's no access to middle schools. So we partner with the village to build a school, and then we stick around to make sure that those classrooms can deliver on quality education. So that means things like teacher training, providing tools for the classroom, all of those kinds of things. And then lastly, and kind of related to our work tonight, we also try to offer different strategies to inspire kids to stick with their education. So that might be scholarships for our graduates who are really outstanding students so that they can continue their education after middle school, or some of the strategies we're going to talk about tonight. Just things to help kids stay with school and stick with it because that's a tough thing to do in Mali. So that's just our brief overview. Before I leave the overview though, I wanted to dig down just a little bit into where your work fits in. So if you volunteer on the Notes of Encouragement campaign, you are basically fitting into that last piece of work I talked about, the inspiring kids to stay in school. And there's several ways we do this, as I mentioned. Scholarships has been kind of a focus now for like 5 or 6 years and has been very successful. But the Connection Project is newer. And what we're trying to do with this project is just acknowledge that it's really hard to succeed as a student in Mali, particularly as a middle school student. Our kids are under a lot of pressure to drop out of school, as Stephanie mentioned. If you're a girl, it might be early marriage that's kind of the pressure, or just leaving home to go find work in the big city to help the family with income. If you're a boy, it's very likely pressure to go to work. Or to help out in the fields. If your family is agricultural kind of income, which most of our families are, there can be some real pressure there to spend more time helping to earn rather than going to school. It's hard to succeed as a student in Mali. So the Connection Project is trying to find small ways to offer support, some fun, and connections, kind of reminders of why education is worth investing their time in, so that we can help keep kids in school and avoid the dropouts as they move through middle school. So again, we're focused on these kind of small ways to help kids feel connected, and your notes will be one of those ways that they can have a little bit of a feeling of kind of support and maybe even pride in what they're doing and how they're tackling this work. So that's a whirlwind tour of Mali Rising's work and kind of how your volunteering will fit in. So any questions about that just brief overview? I'll just pause here. You can use the chat. You can unmute yourself. Questions? All right, we'll keep thinking about them. We'll stop a couple times here. So let's move on to talk about, here's a good question. Why Mali? It's a good question. There's a lot of really practical reasons why Mali. Mali, by pretty much every measure, is one of the poorest countries in the world. Really, really struggles with literacy rate, with infant mortality, with all kinds of measures that we use for kind of poverty, quality of life, etc. And education has been proven to be a real tool for changing that, for shifting that dynamic. So there's lots of practical reasons like that why Mali. There's some discussion of those on our website. However, the more kind of real reason for Mali Rising is a group of people who had come together to work on education, happened to meet a young man from Mali who was very charismatic and convinced them that they should direct their efforts at his country. And he made the case based on kind of the factual things that I've kind of touched on there. And we ended up focused on Mali. So it's a little bit of, practicalities and a little bit of just fluke of history, why we are particularly focused on Mali. One logistical question here, we'll get to more logistics here in a second, but is, do we get to know specific persons we write the notes to? And the answer to that is no. This is not like a pen pal kind of project. We logistically just do not have the staff capacity to do that. So this is not a pen pal effort. It's much more of a, send off a note of encouragement, hence the name. We do try to provide you with feedback so you can see when your notes arrive, like what school they go to and some pictures, that kind of thing. But it won't be kind of a correspondence with a specific person. So let's dive into the notes since we're already going there with the questions. So first, why notes? Why are we doing notes of encouragement? So the reason for notes is several fold. The first is just they're fun for the kids. They're super fun and exciting for them to receive. It's just something special for a student to receive when they are at school. And that might sound frivolous, but it's really not. Again, it's hard to be a student in Mali. Some of these kids will have walked 4 or 5 miles to get to school that day. They will have got up before dawn to do their chores before they do that walk. Having a little bit of fun while you're at school is kind of a nice thing. So just that little bit of joy that you will give them is valuable. And it might seem like it wouldn't be that exciting, but in our villages, there's no electricity outside of what a small solar panel can provide, like cell phone charging, no internet, no mail service. So it really is kind of an event to get a note like that in a way that maybe some of us wouldn't really understand. But if you can put yourself into that situation, it might give you a little perspective. So it's fun. That's one reason. The other is the support kind of aspect that we talked about. The notes do just let students know that someone out there cares, that they're making the effort to go to school. I didn't know how valuable that would be, but we've done this at a smaller scale, and it really is interesting. The kids really respond to it. They like the messages that they receive, and they feel kind of acknowledged for their hard work to get to school and stay there. And then I guess the most practical reason, the third reason, is it turns out these are a fun way for students to practice their English skills. Now, if you're fluent in French and you want to write French notes, please let me know, because those would be welcome. But this, for kids in our schools, they have to, under the Mali National Curriculum, study English. And it's a very rote and dull class for the most part. They're lucky if they have a textbook. There's no stories to read to practice their language. There's no videos, although we're working on that, to practice their language. So a note is at least something kind of interesting to read. So the kids enjoy it, and our English teachers really appreciate it because it gives them kind of a fun lesson to do with the kids where they work through their notes and, kind of struggle with any words they don't know, and the teacher can help. So it's a much more fun and engaging English lesson than they often get. So those are a couple of reasons why notes. Hold on here, I'm just looking at so before I'll go into the questions here in a second, but before I leave that, I wanted to share our notes goal. So, I've given you a couple of reasons why we've seen these notes as valuable. And what we've heard from our teachers is that they really want them. They really enjoy them. They excite the kids. They can practice their English, et cetera, et cetera. So we decided this year to try to get notes to all of our schools and all of our students. So that will require about 3,600 notes. But because we've had such great feedback from the local community, from the teachers, from the students, we really want to try to make that happen with your help. So that's a lot of notes. In the past, the most we've done is a couple hundred at a time. So you can write a few notes as a volunteer on this, or you can write a whole bunch. For example, if you've got a lot of service hours you need to rack up, or you just like writing notes while you watch movies and it makes you feel less guilty to watch a bunch of movies because you're writing notes, we can take your notes. We are asking, and I'll get into this a little bit more with the logistics, that if you take this on, that you do a minimum of 10. They're very short notes that we estimate that'll take about an hour, maybe an hour and a half if you decorate them a ton. So that is the minimum commitment we're asking for logistical reasons that I'll get into. But the real point here is if you can do 10, great. But if you have a bunch of time and energy and you want to do 50, you want to do 100, we can take them. So that's our goal for your work this spring. So any questions? So I see a few in the chat, and then you can, again, unmute yourself or do chat. One question is, will we know what happens to the student, like if they get a scholarship or not? Again, no, this is not like a pen pal project. You're not going to be corresponding with a specific student. It's going to be writing notes that will go to like a classroom or a school, but not this particular student. I do think there's still pen pal programs out there, but we do not have the capacity to do that. So let me see. I'm going to say your name wrong, but Hajar, if that's right, I hope, correct me if I'm wrong, says I can write in French too, which is great. And they point out that in Africa, French is more common. That's true, particularly in West Africa, where our schools are. In Mali, French is the kind of official language. So are we handwriting these? Yes, Marla, these will be handwritten. And Stephanie has some logistical questions, which we'll get to in a minute. Sarah asks, how advanced does the writing have to be? I'm not sure if I quite understand that, but English will be our students' third language that they are just studying. So we'll talk about this a little bit, but we don't want to get too advanced. If that's what you mean by that, Sarah, we should be thinking about, somebody who's just learning the language when you think about sentence structure and vocabulary. These are all logistical questions. Do we write our name or the student's name? We'll get to that. The answer is basically yes, but not your full name. So it looks like there's lots of logistical questions. So maybe we'll just move right on to that, like how to write notes. Sarah says, yeah. Marla, do you want nice stationery or is printer paper okay? Printer paper is just fine. So again, I'll go through some of the logistics here for how to write notes. So the short version of how to write notes, and I'm going to mention here at the outset that I'm going to send you as follow-up to this, a link to the recording of this video, and short written instructions. So don't feel like you have to frantically write every detail down. You'll be able to go back and reference all of this. But how to write notes, write short notes is the first thing. We're not looking for like books, book-length stories. As a guide, I would say 3 to 7 sentences. Now that's fairly arbitrary. Probably not shorter than 3. 7 though is just kind of an outside number. Basically, we're not going to want more than one side of one sheet of paper, and why will become clear in a minute. So your sentences might be longer or shorter. So keep in mind when I say 3 to 7, that's a little arbitrary, but hopefully that gives you a target. Do vary your message a little bit. We're asking you to write at least 10 of these notes. And your notes will likely be going to the same school. So, it's not the end of the world if your notes are very similar, but it would be nice for each student to feel like they got a unique note, slightly different, not exactly the same as their neighbor kind of note. So that doesn't mean that you have to come up with a totally different note. For example, if you're giving somebody some study advice, you can use the same piece of study advice, but just, mix up how you phrase it or have your introduction be, a little bit different. Try just not to make them identical. Then getting to the stationery questions, we're asking that you just use flat pieces of paper and no larger than 8.5 by 11, which is basically a piece of printer paper, somebody put it. And the reason for that is we're going to scan these notes. We're going to ask you to scan them, or we will scan them so that we can send them to Molly. Again, Molly does not have a postal system. So we are going to share these electronically with our staff, who will then print them out and hand deliver them in the villages. So we need it to be a flat piece of paper, not folded or anything like that, because we're going to need to scan it, or you're going to need to scan it. So just don't make it more complicated by folding things. Um, and then optionally, you do not have to do this, but it's kind of fun. You can decorate your note. So in addition to your written message, you can draw things. If you're not artistic like I'm not, you can put stickers. Um, However you want to decorate it is totally fine. If you're not artistic and you don't want to do that, don't worry about it. I'm not very artistic, so I use stickers, or I draw really simple things like hearts or flowers. Um, but if you are artistic, that's kind of super fun, and I know the kids always really enjoy that. It makes it kind of personal and, again, unique and different kind of thing. Um, a couple questions that have come up. Can you share the PowerPoint? Yes, I can totally do that. I don't usually do that, but I'm happy to if that's helpful. And then, can we use motivational quotations? Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I don't know if I've seen anybody do that, but I think it would be wonderful. And that's an easy way to vary your message a little bit. So that's a great idea. Stephanie, you're getting ahead again, Stephanie. Molly staff are not going to take a picture of the note. We're going to scan these, send them to the Molly staff, and they'll print them out and deliver them. But I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute here. So a little bit more on how to write notes. Some of this we've already touched on a little bit, but maybe it's worth reiterating. Again, this is on your written instructions as well. The do's, one of the most important things is just write neatly. Again, these are kids who are studying the English language, so help them out as much as possible by making your writing clear as they're trying to decipher these notes in a foreign language. So for some people that means printing. For me, that means printing. You're welcome to write in cursive if you're a neat writer. In fact, in Mali, the kids do still write in cursive, unlike here, where it seems like our kids no longer do that. Do be yourself and be fun. So like inspirational quotes, like somebody said. You can tell a little bit about yourself, like, hi, I'm Merritt. I live in Utah, and I'm crazy about horses. You could start your note with something a little personal. That's great. Somebody asked about names. Do sign it, but just use your first name, or you can use your first name and your last initial if you're moved to do so. We do, just for security's sake. We've never had a problem, but we just want to keep these a little bit removed. So no last name, no contact info. Keep your message positive. Obviously, these are notes of encouragement. And one trick here, you don't have to do this, but if you're struggling with what to say, you could provide some study advice. And that could be like as simple as, like, one thing I've written is, I really encourage you to work up the nerve to ask questions in class if you need to, because that's the best way to make sure you're understanding, or the easiest way to really learn the material. So it could be something as simple as that. So that's just kind of a little crutch if you're uncertain about what to say. A few don'ts. We've already touched on don't fold your note. Don't write about politics or religion. That's, just to avoid anything that could be sensitive. I already mentioned don't include your contact info. And then don't offer, if you are going to go down the study advice route, we've noticed that sometimes students here will share their tech tricks for studying, like take notes on your iPad or something. And that's not relevant for our students. Think about your audience a little bit. Again, our villages are places without electricity for the most part, without access to Wikipedia. Those kinds of tips are not all that helpful. So a few questions here. Can we type up our message on Google Drawings and send it to you directly without scanning? I don't know exactly how that would work, honestly, but I would be totally game to try. So my suggestion, if you want to do that, is maybe try one and send it to me, just to make sure we can make it work before you spend a whole bunch of time. But if you want to try it, that would be great. And it skips the scanning steps, so that'd be awesome. Claire asks, oh, I didn't specifically say this, but she says, what age are the students? So this is middle school, I did mention, but what that means in Mali is anything from 13 to about 18. Occasionally we even have 12-year-olds. So teenagers, basically. Are we sending notes virtually? Again, I'm going to talk about sending notes next, but we're going to scan them. And do we write our first name on each note we write? Yes. So sign it with your first name. Only your first name, not your last name. And Nana, I'm going to say your name wrong. Not Nana? Nana? Is that right? That's really pretty. I like that. Nana. Okay. So there's no high school. None of our schools are high school. There is high school in Mali, but none of the schools your notes will be going to are high schools. The reason the age range is so big in middle school is that kids often start school late in Mali or miss a year or two. So it's not as regimented as it is in some other places around the world in terms of, the age bracket. All right, I think I caught up with those. Is blank paper preferred? No lined note paper? We've had people do both. I do think if you're going to decorate, blank paper is kind of more, you can be more beautiful. You don't have the lines going through your drawings. But if lined notebook paper is what you have, go for it. It will be fine. For me, that does help me be a little neater. So that might be a consideration, but blank paper is totally fine, and lined paper will work if that's what works for you. All right, so we've had a lot of confusion about like the logistics of the notes. So let's talk about, what it means to like virtually send a note or what have you. So just to reiterate, we're asking you to try, if you're going to commit to this campaign, to do at least 10 notes, because we're going to be dealing with these batches of notes coming in from you. And it's going to be really hard if they're coming in ones and twos when we're trying to get 3,600. So if you can, try to commit to at least that 10 minimum. And again, you're welcome to do 100 if you want. So that's the first thing. And then once you're done with however many, 10 or more, we ask that if possible, you scan your notes using, a lot of us these days have access to that, although not everybody, like a printer or a scanner at school or what have you. And scan them all into one PDF file. So if you're doing 10 notes, it would be one file, and that file would have 10 notes in it. If you're doing 50 notes, again, it would be one PDF file with 50 notes in it, 50 pages. This is just really going to help the staff in Mali so that they're not trying to deal with hundreds of single note files. It's going to be really hard for them, especially given technology in our office in Mali. So if possible, scan them, and then you can email them to this address. It's just info@malirisingfdn.org. And again, I'll send that in the written instructions. If you don't have access to a scanner, you can totally package them up and send them to us at this address, which again, will be in the written instructions. And we'll figure out how to get them scanned. But then you've got to pay postage and things. So if it's possible to scan, it's probably better for both of us. But if you just don't have access to a scanner or whatever, I totally understand, and you can just mail them to us. So any questions about how the scanning and that part will work before we move on? Okay. Once those come to us, then I will be compiling them and sending them to the staff in Mali, and they will print them out there. That avoids any need for shipping across the Great Big Ocean. Especially, like I say, Mali does not have a postal service, so things are very challenging unless we do it virtually. Someone's asked, can we use an app like Cam Scanner? I'm not familiar with that particular app, but if it functions as a scanner and you can still email it off to us, I believe that should work. The one trick would be making sure that you can combine them all into one file. So if it's going to just take, what we can't do is have you take like a photo of each note and then get, 30 photos of your 30 notes. We just can't handle that on the Molly end. So the next question was, is scanning like taking a photo of your note? It's kind of like that, but we don't want you to just take a photo of your note. It does need to be a scan. I can look into this Cam Scanner app and send as follow up. Maybe that's something people would like to use. But most printers these days are scanners. Most schools will have a scanner that you can borrow if you're a student. Um, they are very common. William says if you have an iPhone, you can scan through the Notes app. Super easy if you Google it. Well, there it sounds like for iPhone users, easier than Cam Scanner. You don't even have to download anything. Oh, and Nana says you can probably go to your nearest FedEx. It's true. They might charge you. I don't know how that would work at FedEx, but hopefully it would be minimal to scan something. All right, so we've got some good ideas there. I'll try to send some of those in the follow-up tomorrow too, if people are struggling with finding a scanner. And again, if worst comes to worst, you can mail the notes off to us and we will figure out how to get them scanned here. But if you can, it'll be great. So I think I have just a little bit more logistics here. All right, so we've kind of touched on this, but once we receive your notes, we're going to group them together until we have enough for basically an entire school in each chunk. And then we're going to send them off to the staff in Molly who will print them. And when they deliver them, we're going to ask the staff to take some photos of the kids with notes so that you can kind of see, hey, your notes arrived in Mamarosso. And here's some students enjoying your notes. That's as much of a direct connection as we can make. Like I say, we can't do the pen pal thing, but I do want you to get that feedback of seeing them, kind of in the hands of the students. So you get at least that much feedback on your hard work. Somebody asked about timing. My request is that you try to get me your batch of notes by May 14th. That's actually a little earlier than the actual probably drop dead, but we want to make sure we can deliver them, and we'll have 25 schools to get them out to. So I want to give us a little bit of a cushion. One of the unknowns this year is because of first COVID-19 and then a coup that occurred in Mali. The opening of school that was supposed to start in October did not start till January, and we don't know when the school year is going to end. So I want to hedge our bets a little bit and ask you to get these notes to us by May 14th, and that will give us at least a month to deliver them. If you miss that deadline, reach out to me because there's a good chance we'll still be able to take them and continue to feed them over to Molly. But to be sure that your notes will get into students' hands, get them to me by May 14th. And someone asked, can we put photos in our notes? Yeah, I haven't seen anybody do that, but yeah. So if you wanted to have a photo of like an interesting landmark in your town or city or something, you could totally do that. And it would, just scan as part of the note. That would work fine. Especially if you're not artistic. I wish I had thought of that. So you can totally do that. It could be a picture of you waving. That would be. I think the kids would find that fascinating. So feel free to try the photo route. I love that idea, Marla. All right, so just a couple other logistical loose ends. I know at least a couple people are doing this as a group project, like you're here and you're going to take this back to a student group or a service group, and you're going to have a bunch of people work on notes. So if you're doing that, or if you just are really motivated, I wanted to point out if you can do big chunks of notes, so if you can do 30 to 80 notes, that's essentially a whole classroom of students. It varies by school. And if you can do 150 to 250, that's essentially a whole school. So if you can tackle that kind of work, let us know when you send in your commitment form, which I'll touch on in a few minutes here. And then we can say to you, okay, your notes are going to, Fajio Bugu, and they're going to be delivered on this date, and we'll kind of have like a school for you or a classroom for you. So if that's something, the scale of what you're thinking about tackling, either personally or as a group, let me know on that commit form or send me an email, and we'll work out the right fit for you in terms of a school or a classroom. So Nana's asking, will there be a color printer to show our decorative stuff? Yes. So you can feel free to use color. Sarah says, we can put photos of ourselves in the notes, question marks. Yep, I think that that would be fine. I can't think that that's a security risk of any sort. So I guess it's a personal choice if you're concerned about that, but I can't see that causing any kind of problem, and I think our students would love it. And Nana asked, how many schools are we aiming to do? There's 25 schools currently. So that's what we're hoping. That's the about 3,600 students that we've set as our goal. So it's a lot of kids, a lot of notes. So again, if you've got time or you've got a group, we'd love it. You did a lot of notes. Any other questions before I get to service hours, just about logistics? Because there's a lot of questions there about how the notes are being sent and all that. Did I clear all that up or anything else?
I have a question.
Sure.
I came in a little late. So I missed the logistics part. Is there a way I could like get this in email somehow?
Yes. Is that Claudia?
Yes.
Yes. So Claudia, we are going to probably tomorrow, because it takes a while for the video to process. I will send you written instructions, these PowerPoint slides, and a link to the video recording of tonight. So you can even go back and watch what you missed.
Oh, awesome. That's great.
Yeah. So you'll be set. It probably will be tomorrow by the time I get the video up on YouTube and everything else, but it'll come your way.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Anybody else? Okay, so let's just quickly on service hours, because it always is a big question mark. Service hours are great, and we're so glad you're here to do your service hours. So a couple things. Usually you either need a form that I need to fill out or sign, or a letter. I'm happy to do both of those. If you're doing the form, just go ahead and send it to us. Online forms are really great, but if it's a hard copy, I'll work it out and get it back to you. If you need a letter, some institutions require a letter. I have to ask you to write the letter yourself and send it to me, and then I will put it on our letterhead and tweak it and sign it and send it back to you. I just can't write like hundreds of these service hour letters. So that's just the requirement for Molly Rising if you need a letter. Either way, form or letter, please do not wait till the last minute if you're up against a deadline for proving your service hours. Because I am the only staff person here. So there's a decent chance you're going to send it in. I'm going to be in meetings the whole afternoon and not see your request, or I'm going to be out sick that day. So I really need you to give me a couple of days to do the form or the letter. So do yourself a favor and don't leave it to the last minute. Send it my way a day or two ahead of time, and we'll get you set up. So that's the story on service hours. I know there's some questions in the chat, but any questions about service hours while I go back? Okay, so a couple questions from the chat here. Can we type the notes? That's interesting. You totally can. I do think there's something really delightful about receiving a handwritten note. Maybe I'm old-fashioned, but it does make it a little more personal. But if you don't have great handwriting, or you're just worried about it and you want to type, that is fine with me. I would suggest maybe at least, sign your name yourself, or add some kind of little drawing or something just to give it that personal touch, if you do that. But if typing is what works for you, go for it. And so Nana asked, so do our notes have to be the size of a paper, or can they be shorter if we use Google Drawings? Again, I don't really know what Google Drawings is, honestly, but they can be no larger when they're printed out than a piece of paper, because that's what in the end they're going to be printed on a Molly. If they're smaller, that's totally fine. Like sometimes people do, I don't know if this would be the equivalent in Google Drawings, but people do like a half sheet of paper and write their note. That's totally fine. So yeah, I'd say 3 to 7 sentences, and something between like the half sheet and the full sheet is what you're shooting for. I hope that answered your question, Nina. Could you please give an idea about the letter? There is in the written instructions a sample note. It's not the most exciting note. I wasn't very creative when I wrote it, but there is a sample note. So when you get those, you'll be able to look at that. Um, the basics that I would suggest is introduce yourself briefly, say something encouraging like, wow, I just learned about, how hard it is to just even get yourself to school in Mali. Keep up the great work, something encouraging. And then you could do, like I say, some kind of study advice or an additional note of encouragement of, go for it or study hard, or, it doesn't have to be poetry necessarily, but there is a sample letter that you'll get, or some sample note in the instructions. Sarah says, will we get the service hours once we've sent the notes? Yeah, that's generally how we've done it. If you need something incremental, like if you're working on an epic 100 notes and you need me to sign off on something halfway through, talk to me and we can work something out. But usually you submit the notes. And like I said, we estimate 10 notes would take something on the order of an hour. If you do a lot of decorating, though, it could take an hour and a half or so. So it's kind of honor system, but I do use that as a general rule of thumb. So if you do 10 notes and you say it took you 10 hours, I might ask questions. But submit your notes and then we can do the service hours. If Nana's pointing out, if you do, type, you can do it faster. That is true. You lose a little bit of that personal touch for sure. So, if we type the letter, then make it into a PDF, would we need to scan it? No, if it comes as a PDF already, that's totally fine. Again, you do lose a little bit of the personal touch there, but it would totally work. And then, a suggestion for the note: let them know that you're proud. That's really good. If you come to the trivia, to learn more about Mali, you could share something you learned about Mali that you didn't know before, or you could Google it if you're doing your notes before then. Like, I didn't know the richest man in the world of all time was from Mali, way back in the day. Just any little thought you want to share about yourself, about how hard they're working in school, or advice on succeeding in school. Those would be the general categories I'd suggest. I think I've caught up on the questions in the chat. Anybody else have anything they want to throw out before we move on a little bit here to next steps? All right. So, couple things about next steps. It's pretty simple. This is probably our most simple volunteer campaign at Mali Rising. So I'm going to right now put in the chat a link to the webpage for this campaign, and I'll also send this in the follow-up. But you can use that link to commit to the campaign. So you signed up for tonight, but you might think, this isn't for me. I'm not going to do that. That's totally fine. But if you are excited and you do want to do it, go and sign up at that link. And it does ask you to estimate about how many notes you want to write. We're not going to hold you to that. Don't worry about it. We're just trying to get a feel for okay, how many pledged notes do we have? How close are we getting to our goal? That kind of thing. So use that to sign up and give us some idea of what you're trying to do. And then you'll just write your notes, scan them like we talked about, and send them in by that May 14th deadline. Again, if at all possible, try to get them in by that deadline. If you miss it for some reason, reach out to me and we'll figure out a way to still use those notes. Don't worry about it. Before I go on, Sarah says, when we write, would it be better to use words like could not or couldn't? That's a good question. I would say could not. But I don't think there's a wrong way, because either way, the teachers can use it as a teaching exercise. If the kids aren't, say, familiar with those shortened forms, it's an opportunity to talk about it. So I think either way would be fine. Um, yeah, I think probably more importantly, try not to use words that are too esoteric, like esoteric. Um, but they do have an English language dictionary, French to English dictionary. And again, that can be a learning opportunity. So don't worry too much. Just do keep your audience kind of in mind as you're writing. Okay. So that's the basic next steps for this campaign. Uh, so if you want to engage, sign up to write a batch of notes. And you can sign up again. Like if you want to sign up to write 10 right now, and then you think, oh, this is kind of fun, you can come back and say, oh, I'm going to do another 30. That's totally great. So sign up for whatever you feel comfortable with. Um, in the follow-up email I send, there also will be a link to just kind of sign up as a volunteer more generally. And that just asks for a little bit of information so we can send you other volunteer opportunities you might be interested in. And then again, you can consider coming to our next event in May, which is just for volunteers. And it's going to be kind of a special night where we'll learn a little bit about Mali, about the people and the culture and the place, um, and have a little bit of fun together rather than just me talking at you. So I'll call up the form in just a second so we can look at that together in case you all have questions about it. But just any questions generally before we do that? You can use the chat or unmute yourself. Questions about Mali Rising, about the volunteer effort. I thought for sure somebody would point out that the kids spelled thank you wrong.
Hi, Merit.
Hi.
Stephanie.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, how are you today? Thank you for putting this on.
No problem.
I had a question because this is my second volunteer opportunity with Mali Rising. And I'm also participating in the flashcard campaign. Now, for this particular one, we are scanning the notes versus mailing them direct. But how will they, and this is totally different, I should have just side chatted you, but for the flashcards, will they be actually receiving the hard copies of the flashcards that I'm drawing and writing on?
They will. And that's requiring me to learn about shipping containers and care about things like Suez Canal accidents and all of that. So those will take much more time to get over there because of that. Whereas these, we can get a little more instant gratification because we're going to send them virtually. But that's why we're doing that extra step of scanning them, is that it's quite hard to get things physically to Mali. Usually we're going over with like suitcases full of stuff. You should see the guys at customs. They're just like, what? How many menstrual kits do you have? So that's the answer to your question there, Stephanie. Okay, so here's another question. Should we put all the notes in one paper scanned or scanned every single note alone? All in one file. So if you're doing 10 notes, you'll scan them all into one PDF file and send them our way as one file. If you're doing 100 notes, you'll scan them all into one file and send them our way as one file. And like I say, this is just because the staff, we only have a few staff in Mali. They just cannot deal with 3,600 individually scanned files coming their way. So that's the answer to that. If that's not clear, feel free to email me or give me a call and we can talk about it more. So Hajar says, I want to know more about the letter related to service hours. We can chat here as we wrap up, or we could totally do like an email exchange, whatever works better for you. I'm happy to answer any questions. So Hajar, just let me know how you wanna do that. Before sorry, go ahead.
Oh, how do you incorporate the photos into handwritten?
The way that I would imagine that, like I say, nobody's ever done that before, but the way that I would imagine that is if I, this already has a photo on it, right? So if I had written a note, I would put either, if you're technologically savvy, you could put the photo in, electronically if you want, or low tech, when I went to scan the note, I would just have the photo on it, and the scanner would pick up your written note and the photo as it goes. So a couple different ways you could do it, I guess. But it's a new idea, so I'd say experiment and see what works easiest for you. One thing you could do, I guess, is you could, now I'm getting silly, but you could, if you're technologically savvy, you could set something up like this, where it's almost like a letterhead, where you have the photo of you waving at the top, print it out, and then you could handwrite your note on the bottom part of the paper. And that way you don't have to do the photo every time. So yeah, a couple different ways you could do it. Other, hold on, there's another chat question, it looks like. Is there an age limit for the people writing the notes? No, as long as you have good handwriting, and I know some 11-year-olds that have better handwriting than I do, you can write the notes. Again, make sure you're only using your first name and no contact info, because we definitely want to make sure we're safe with all of this, but there's no age limit on this project, as long as you can write legibly. So before, as we start to wrap up, this is the, I hope you can see on your screen, this is the web page that link I put in the chat will take you to. The video will be up here tomorrow. The instructions, the written instructions are already up here. If you're eager, you can go get them. But I'll also send that stuff to you tomorrow. And then here's the form. If you scroll down, we're just asking for some basic information and an approximation of how many notes you want to write. And then this is where, if you are writing a bunch, if you want to be assigned a classroom or even a whole school, click those boxes, one of those boxes, and I'll get in touch with you and we'll figure out the best way to make that work out for you. So if you want to do this campaign, you have to at some point submit that form. We've been pleasantly overwhelmed with volunteers. So I have to ask you to fill out the form so that I get everybody into a system and can keep track of you in an easy way and keep track of our goal for the notes. So any questions about how to find that form or fill it out, or about anything else? All right, well, we're right at the top of the hour. Oh wait, here's a question. What if we fill out 30 to 80 on the form, but have extra time and do more? Awesome, awesome sauce. It's always gonna be good to do more. I don't feel we're at risk of having too many notes right now. I will let you all know if that changes. So if you sign up for 30 to 80 and you do more, great. Maybe just reach out to me and let me know, because I could give you a bigger class. Some of our classes, many of our grades have 100+ kids in them, which is a nightmare when you think about being a teacher in that classroom. So if you end up doing more, we might just upgrade you to a larger size group kind of thing. And this is a good question. Lillian asked, is there a deadline to sign up? I did not put a deadline to sign up in, just a deadline for finishing the notes. I would encourage you all, if possible, to commit sooner rather than later, because that will just really help us understand where we are. Like if we have 1,000 notes pledged or 50 notes pledged is going to be a lot different in terms of the amount of scrambling we do in the next few weeks. So if you can sign up sooner, please do. But that May 14th, getting the notes in is the most important deadline. Okay, anything else before we're done for the evening? Well, thank you for being such a engaged group and kind of making it less hard for me. Sometimes it feels like you're just talking to a blank wall. So I really appreciate the chat. Oh, one last question. Have you ever worked on the same project for another country? No, never have. I, as a kid, had pen pals in other countries way back in the day, but I've never run a project like this in another country, so no. Oh, or are we thinking about expanding it? At this point, no, but there are lots of great groups working in all around the world. So if you have a particular country in mind, let me know. I might be able to connect you up with another organization that's doing at least similar things around, many, many countries. There's a lot of activity happening. All right. Well, we're at the top of the hour, so I know you're probably hungry or ready to get out and enjoy the spring evening. So thank you all for coming. I'll send a follow-up tomorrow, but you can find the instructions at that website now. And you can sign up now if you are inspired to do so. And thank you again for being here tonight. Take care. Bye, everybody.